welcome back to Movie Horizon. The title of this video is titled very vaguely because I didn't want to give away any spoilers. And by the way, this is a heavy spoiler discussion. But in any case, I want to discuss the whole question of where the tethers came from, how they were created, the so-called cloning program, all of that. Alright? So, if you were to ask me, how does the cloning program work? How did it work? All that. I would tell you there's a long answer and a short answer. The short answer is that it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's simply a plot device, a plot contrivance. Just accept the fact that they're here. They're doppelgangers. They're mirror images of other people. They're the darker side of oneself. It's about the haves and the have-nots, all that. You know, I get that. That's it. The filmmaker did introduce this idea of a cloning program. So as part of our due diligence and as an intellectual exercise, I'm going to take Jordan Peele's premise on face value and go down that rabbit hole, literally, and examine how this program worked, how it might have worked, was it possible, not possible, all that. Alright, so first of all, the idea could be introduced that these tethers are twins. Now, if we were to look at that in the literal sense, that would mean that they were born at the same time, meaning the tether and the human person, born at the same time with the same mother under some type of medical supervision, presumably, and the like. So in that scenario, a woman goes to a hospital knowing or unknowing that she has twins, and by one means or another, one twin is essentially kidnapped, or the mother is told that one twin died when in fact it didn't die, or shuttled away to some local underground bunker. And we've seen that type of concept before in films like The Omen, and that's how the program stockpiled in essence all these twins. But let's face it, to do that on some massive scale whereby you're doing it for every birth that ever takes place is just inconceivable. And of course, not every person in the world was a product of a twin birth, so that's just not possible. So alright, so if you're going to go with the idea that all these people, all the tethers, are clones, and I think that's really the general presumption, that they're government sponsored, government created clones. And mind you, these tethers are all essentially the same age as the human counterpart, the subject of the clone. So that would necessarily mean that the clone was created at or about the same time as the real person's birth. That would mean that if by some means you get the newborn baby's DNA and started making a clone right away, that clone could necessarily be no closer in age than at least, say, 9 months apart in age, right? So while they're not exact twins, you could say they are, virtual twins. Now, yes, in films we've seen where the bad people or the scientists have taken someone's DNA and cloned them, and the clone was literally fully grown in literally days, if not hours, and these grown clones had full command of the English language, and they were highly skilled at fighting and shooting sophisticated weapons, and frankly that defies all science and logic. So in this discussion, I'm really trying to stay within reasonable science and logic and plausibility. So going down that route, think about it, the sheer infrastructure necessary to collect DNA from every live birth in America for years and years, that infrastructure alone would have to be massive. Is that even possible that you could do that? And to boot, it's being done secretly, right? just think of all the covert accomplices you would have to have in hospitals, in clinics, in delivery rooms all over the country, right? So if they're doing this for every American for years and years, and keeping them hidden underground for years and years, you are literally talking about millions and millions of people. Okay, first of all, do you really think there are enough abandoned tunnels and mines and subway stations, etc., to house millions and millions of people? I don't think so. And could you really keep all these people hidden for years and years? I mean, it would take hundreds of government workers just to manage and house all these people. Could you keep all these communities, because they're scattered presumably all over the country, could you keep all these communities secret literally for decades? I mean, I know they're tethers, I know they're clones, but don't even these tethers get sick? Did they have their own medical facilities? What happened when they died? Did they not have to go to the hospital for one reason or another, like you and me, for migraine headache, panic attack, infected tooth, busting their head open, slipping, falling after getting out the shower, with incarcerated hernia or something like that? Next point, who's paying for all this? Now, you're going to say, the government. I mean, it's a government program. Okay, if it's a government program, why are they housing all these people in abandoned mines and tunnels and warehouses and sloppy conditions and dank conditions? Why not just use the government money and build massive professional facilities with regular food and housing, running water, a large, massive detention center, large, massive government hospital, experimentation facility? Why do they have to do all this in these abandoned facilities, these dungeon-like conditions? Why are they resigned to having to do it like that? Searching out abandoned properties. They have government money. They can build all the housing facilities they want. So that doesn't make sense. All right. So next point. What exactly happened to the government program? Did they shut it down? Were the government people killed or eaten, or did they just walk off the job? I mean, what exactly happened to these people? Okay, so let's first address the question: how long ago did the government, leave, or how long have the tethers been unsupervised? Basically running their own show. Was it recently, a long time ago? Do we have any indication of this? Now, I submit to you that they have not been at this facility, this one at the amusement park, and the tethers have been unsupervised at this location since at least 1986. Now, why do I say this? Okay, hear me out. They had to be unsupervised back in 1986 because how else would the tether red as a little girl wander up to the fun house to meet the human Adelaide child unless there was no supervision, government supervision? She could have as easily have just walked outside the fun house. Okay, now you're going to say, oh yeah, but she's just a little girl. Little girls wander around. That's how that girl even wandered off from her parents at the arcade. So little girls wander around. There could have been government supervision, and she just wandered up to the fun house. They just didn't know about it, and all that. Okay, look, if there was still government supervision at the time, how could this little girl? I mean, this is what she explained. How could this little girl drag Adelaide down into the tunnel? We know it's not like a little short distance. They had to go through all these little obscure mechanical rooms and down escalators and all this type of stuff. All that distance, and then once she got back to the main housing location, she handcuffed the girl to a bunk bed, Now, how is it possible she's doing all this if the government is still there, her government handlers are all still there? How do they let that take place? How do they not see all that happen? How could she do all that under the watchful eye, the supervision of who's ever there? That's just not plausible. That's just not plausible. So if you accept that those 2 points there, that means that these tethers have been unsupervised for at least 30 years. And if that's the case, is it plausible or even possible that these millions of tethers could go undetected for over 30 years? Furthermore, how do they get 30 years of supplies? Clothing, scissors, all this. How is all this even paid for? Either way, let's say that the government left. How could they shut the program down and leave literally millions of tethers to fend for themselves? I mean, that was the shutdown plan? Just to walk away? I mean, really? Like on a Friday, they get the letter, oh, we're shutting it down. So they just, Friday, turned out the lights, collect the baggage, cleaned out the files, left the building, and just left the tethers behind? That was their shutdown plan? Does that even make sense? Leave all these people, no means of survival. They wouldn't figure out that these people would just venture out into the world and cause havoc? I mean, it's not like they left and, locked them all inside cages or anything like that. It seemed like they was basically free to move around. They didn't figure that these tethers would just wander out into the above world and then reveal the existence of this massive program. I mean, they weren't gonna put all these tethers to sleep or anything like that. I mean, I certainly doubt that. I mean, that would make for some other little thriller movie, but that's not generally the way they would do a human experiment program. Okay, so alternatively, you're going to say, oh, no. See, the tethers took over. They were tired of being treated shabbily, and they killed all the government people and all that. All right, so let's look at that idea. Now, are you going to say the government just stood by and let all this happen? And they just let it happen and just walked away? They didn't respond or anything like that. They just said, "Oh, okay." They didn't retaliate. They didn't say, "This is unacceptable. We're going to, put these tethers all in some type of detention." They just allowed all these hundreds of government people to get killed, and they had no response whatsoever. That doesn't make sense. Okay, next point. We have to imagine that this one facility that we see here in this film can't be the sole facility in the country. I mean, just semi-logically, we're talking about millions of people, and semi-logically, there have to be similar facilities all over the country, housing hundreds of people each, if not hundreds of thousands of people, semi-logically, in each of these facilities. How are they all, coordinated? Because it seems like there's some element of coordination. They're presumably all wearing the same clothes. I mean, these facilities are spread all over the country. I mean, are they all sort of under the direction of one person? I mean, is Red the de facto leader of the entire, I'll call it, Tether Nation? Because we're led to believe she's the only one who can talk, and logically it's hard to imagine the other people who would be able to talk in these other facilities. So does that make her the leader of the entire Tether world? And if so, how is she in charge of all these facilities all over the country? I mean, what communication infrastructure could she possibly have in place to do all that? I mean, she's not working with any cell phones, no computers. She's only one person. Who's ordering all these supplies, the uniforms, the scissors, the gloves, and all that? Who's been paying for all that for years and years? Okay, next point. How are all these people surviving underground? What are they eating and drinking for years and years? Now, you're going to say, oh no, see, they were eating the rabbits. The rabbits, they might have been used for these experiments and everything like that, but they was probably living off the rabbits for food and sustenance, 24/7 for years and years. You have basically a limitless supply of rabbits, and that's what they was eating for years and years. Okay, I'm going to go along with that for a second here, but here's my next question. How were they feeding the rabbits? Where does the rabbit food come from? Who's paying for the rabbit food? Rabbits need to live on something as well. And, are the rabbits eating each other for food? I mean, not only do I doubt that, it's not physiologically possible. I mean, the fact of the matter is that rabbits cannot eat meat. Their digestive systems aren't designed to eat meat. It's really designed only to eat, plant life and such. If a rabbit eats anything that's animal-based, they get a very upset stomach and have, a lot of medical issues. So no, the idea that the rabbits would feed on themselves or something along those lines is not even physiologically, possible. Now, you're going to say, okay, so, now what happened was the tethers, they would go out and they would, round up and scavenge for food for the rabbits, brush and plant wildlife and all this type of stuff, and they would bring it back to the rabbits. That's what the rabbits would feed on. Okay, so let's look at this idea. Even if you had, let's say, 100 tethers out there scavenging where they were on that beach, mind you, where there's nothing literally but sand for miles and miles, you are not going to find enough plant life to feed all those hundreds and hundreds of rabbits day in and day out for years and years and years. So I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. Next point. These tethers were not, from what we could see, they're not confined or detained underground, and they seem free to move about. Nothing was apparently keeping them from moving freely about, and apparently, and I'm not going to go into the whole social conflict and questions that was going on in their minds, but apparently they had a deep disregard or disdain or hatred for being underground, jealousy maybe. Why didn't they just leave those facilities and go to the above ground world and just try to fend for themselves in the above ground world? Live a life on the above ground world, almost like a homeless person, I guess you could say. I mean, there was no one keeping them underground. There was no security infrastructure. They were basically free to move about, which at times they did. And you have millions and millions of people. People get restless. They wander around. They explore. You mean to tell me, if they wandered out into that amusement park and saw all those people, laughing and smiling and holding hands, and these, muscle guys walking around on the beach without the shirts on, and young women in crop tops and cut-off shorts walking around, and they got the, eating a half-eaten slice of pizza that they picked out the garbage, that they wouldn't prefer that life over eating these raw rabbits 24/7, day in and day out for years and years and years? Okay, next point. How was Red able to, I'll say, assemble this doppelganger family in the first place? meaning that she, very iconically was outside the house. She had a tethered duplicate of the husband and tethered duplicates of the boy and the girl. They're all standing there. They're seemingly genetic copies of the other person. Clones, I guess, would be the proper word. How was she able to get these three other people all there? Now, even if you accept the premise that each of these humans in the family had a government clone created for them somewhere, just logically, they were created in facilities spread out all over the country, randomly, in different bunkers and facilities and whatnot, and these clones, when they're created, are not grouped together by family or anything like that. They're just little clone babies. No one knows what their future is going to bring. No one knows where they're going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now. They're presumably just stockpiled locally to where they're created all over the country. They have no idea who they're going to marry decades into the future. None of that. So the other tether members of any given family could be all over the country. The dad could be in Idaho. One child could be in Texas. The other child could be in California. How would Red be able to locate the other tether members and coordinate, bring them all together and everything? Logistically, how could they all just be together in one spot? I mean, they can't take any type of public transportation, planes or trains or buses or anything like that. They can't walk along the highway. But, Adelaide and her family got there at that amusement area literally that day, maybe the night before. But Red was able to assemble all these other tether family members literally, seemingly within 24 hours. How could she pull that off? No technology at her disposal, no financial resources at her disposal. That would seem almost impossible. Okay, along those same lines, and this is the last question, where did the tether children of Red come from? Where did Red's tether children come from? And along those same lines, where did those twin white ladies, the children of the family friend down the road in the big expensive house, they were twins, they looked like teenagers, where did they come from? Okay, because it's all part of the same question. So logically, you're going to say, well, they were created by the experiment too, because they're tether children. Okay, well, that's just simply not possible. I mean, let's just talk about Red's tether children. How old would you say they are? The boy looked to be about 10 and 12 years old. The girl looked to be about 14 or so. So they were, created in like the 2000s or born in the 2000s or something like that, right? So that is years and years after the government is no longer around. So they could not have been created by the government program. That's not possible. Now you're going to say, oh, well, see, maybe the tethers took over the program. The tethers then learned how to do the technique and all that. Okay, let's be for real. The tethers didn't have no training. They didn't have no education. And yes, it did look like there was some type of schoolroom or type of facility in that one location, but we don't know whether they were using that classroom as a teaching facility or whether it was just that they was using this one abandoned underground school. It just happened to be a school, but the tethers weren't using it as a school. That just happened to conveniently be there for housing. The idea that the tethers perfected this super highly sophisticated cloning technique simply from observing, watching the other scientists, while they were strapped to some table, that's just, ludicrous. Come on, let's be serious. Plus, even when the government program was in operation, the operations probably required millions of dollars to buy equipment and supplies and chemicals, pipettes, beakers, all the disposable hardware that would have to be required to engage in this type of science and experimentation and methodology. And there's naturally a cost of just maintaining this equipment, repairing this sophisticated equipment, replacing equipment. Mind you, it's not like they had an IT department or service contracts or anything like that. There's just a normal wear and tear on equipment that occurs. And mind you, we're talking about over 30 years. The idea that they could just use all this equipment for years and years and years and not require anyone from the outside to come in and fix something or repair something and need a little replacement part for something, for this highly technical, sophisticated equipment, is just really absurd. I mean, let's face it, most of us can't even maintain one dime cell phone for a year, let alone maintaining any piece of equipment for 30 years. So the idea that the tethers took over, in a sense, in effect, the program themselves, simply is not plausible. So the alternative to that would be that Red gave birth to these children. I don't want to say in captivity, but you understand what I'm trying to say. In the tunnel, so to speak. Now, that could possibly make sense were it not for the fact that these children appear to be virtually genetically identical to their human counterpart, okay? Which would mean that Red conceived with the exact tether version of a husband. Now, if you're going to go down that route, what would be the chance that Red and the tether dad would randomly hook up amongst the millions and millions of tethers out there at precisely the same time as their human counterparts? I mean, they weren't living down there as a family for years and years. They would have had no reason to interact with each other or even know of each other down there, waiting for the right time to have sex. They would literally have no clue of what the humans are doing above ground, where they're meeting, what they're doing when they're meeting, any of that. Like I said, who knows where the tether dad was created? That could have been anywhere in America. Who knows where he was born? And then his clone was probably raised in the local government cloning facility, wherever the hell that was. And it's not like the two tether versions met at college or at a company picnic or something like that. They were just two random, for all they knew, two random tethers in two separated facilities. What could have brought them together randomly like that? And even if they got together, what's the odds they're going to successfully conceive and have children that exactly duplicate the human children? Those children individually could have turned out to have totally different characteristics, like all the offspring from two parents. That can't be controlled. And mind you, even this is after the government has left. So it's not like there was some secret scientific way that the government had to make sure that the tether offspring were going to be somehow exact duplicates of human offspring that are being created above ground, who knows where and who knows at what time. Alright guys, so this is the end of my questions. I just had some points I wanted to raise, give you some food for thought, generate some discussion in your own mind or with your friends. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and check out the other videos in my catalog, and I will see you again next time. Bye bye.